So how do you like get that out of, constant management? Like they're opposite of each other. It's like, it's just like petting the thing until it dies.
I know. And we as deer managers and land managers feel like we're doing good, but
you just go in and Tommy Boy a property.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Stroke it. And we're back. HUNTR Podcast.
Hey.
Episode 54.
Yep. I think that's right.
54. Cool. Well, it's the week after ATA show, if you're listening to it, but we're leaving tomorrow for Louisville, Kentucky.
It'll be our first time tearing all this stuff down. It's been here for a year.
We put it back together. This may be the last HUNTR Podcast that you ever hear.
We're gonna get to really know our equipment here this week.
I did see it won't affect us tomorrow, but like tomorrow night and a Friday, they're gonna get like a good chunk of snow when we're there.
In Louisville?
Yeah, they'll probably shut the damn place down.
Ooh. How's the drive look tomorrow?
We'll be fine. It's not supposed to start snowing until late afternoon.
Okay.
But once we're there, it'll probably start snowing pretty quickly after. I think they're going to get more snow than we're getting. So I think they're getting 3 to 4 inches.
We haven't had any here yet, right? A couple dustings.
Yes.
Or maybe you
everything's
have
south. No, it's all going south of us. Like I saw Gatlinburg, Tennessee the other day got like 10 to 12 inches or something.
Something's coming this weekend because I got those pictures of Lebrowski last night, and I was calling Dale about it, and we were looking at weather fronts. Let me see here. I know Friday.
I think that's it. It's coming like Thursday, Friday. We're supposed to get 2 to 3 inches, maybe.
No.
Yeah.
Well, in Ohio, Thursday and Friday are like the days. Thursday, Friday, Saturday is warming up a little bit, but then Sunday it's like 42, and that's your precipitation, but it's going to be rain probably.
Yeah.
It's getting cold though.
Yeah, it's been weird. You're starting to see a little bit more deer movement with this this cold snap. Well, so I think Thursday this is coming through. Is it Friday, Saturday? It's supposed to be real cold, like
Thursday, Friday.
Low 20s and then teens in the morning.
This is the farm I'm talking about, but it's Thursday. What's today? Yes, tomorrow, Friday are cold. Saturday's warming up a little bit. Sunday's rain, and then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday is like cold snap, high of 20s.
We've had so much rain, which I'm sure if anybody's listening from like the Dakotas are like, fuck you asshole.
I know.
Like it's been sloppy here.
Yeah. I don't know, man. A lot of uncertainty as we're getting into. I spent some time yesterday just combing through my folder of tags and applications and stuff. And
At that time?
It is that time. Or about that time anyways, yeah. I just don't know.
I'm just itching to, I don't know, cut a tree. Use a chainsaw.
Yep.
Figure out a food plot. Find a shed.
Yeah, man. I don't
know if I've given up completely on the season. Pretty damn close. Now with ATA and then SHOT Show and trying to close on this farm, my time's thin. Unless I can like find a mature buck when I close on the farm and kill him in 2 days. Possible.
You don't think it's worth going back up to where the 200's at?
No. That deer's gone or dead or shedded or something. I don't think he's dead. We would have heard about it unless somebody poached him, of which we probably still would have heard about it. I haven't seen him, and that happened last year. I lost him right before Thanksgiving, right around gun season. And then I thought I saw him again in January or February, but he was shed out already. So
any idea where he's going?
None. I think one of those cameras died on me. Yeah, he's there. He's still feeding. That cut cornfield, I'm sure, is where he's at, which means he's not on my camera areas. He's off the property to the north. I think he's still bedding either on the property or close to it, but he's feeding in that cut cornfield up to the north. And yeah, so I don't have any cameras up there.
If we weren't going to be at ATA, I'd say grab the muzzleloader, head out there this coming weekend.
Yeah, I need to get those cameras anyways. I'll end up going back out just to grab those cameras out of there and maybe take a twirl for sheds.
That'd be the shed to find.
You'd see it from a long way off. But yeah,
that's the only spot that seems like it would make sense for you at this point is go. I mean, dude, there's a lot of bucks out there worth hunting.
I've got a bunch of good bucks in Kentucky. Just glad to see them made it through. But I did see that 5 or 6 year old 8-point on camera the other day
in
Kentucky.
Yeah, the old one.
Mm-hmm. So I mean, he'd definitely be one that I'd like to get on. Just inconsistent, and frankly, that season's winding down fast. Like I think next week it's over.
Yeah.
PA, I don't know. I did have some survivors on the mountain, which was cool. It's so hard at this point because I'm like, well, like that deer's gonna make it. Do I really want to shoot him as like a 3-year-old 8-point, or give him a chance to shoot him next year?
Yeah, man, it's hard to see like from year to year. Like I like to look back at my camera roll and stuff, and it's organized by date, so it's super easy to like go back a year ago, 2 years ago, today, and see like what kind of deer were showing up on camera and stuff. And there's some things that have like rung true with me, or that like I was like, oh, like kind of aha moments for me with I don't know if it was Sturgis or who was telling us about like, well, you've got these bucks and you'll watch them from like 1 to 2, and then they disappear. Like I've got so many of these. I was just even looking last year at like a lot of good 2 and 3 year old bucks that like weren't killed as far as I know. Like we know the neighbors and stuff. They're just gone. And one of them I did get one picture of. Do you remember that that one we were asking Winky about, if it was 3 or 4?
Mm-hmm.
That was a banging 2-year-old the year before. I'm pretty sure. And then this year showed up one time,
and then gone.
The deer was on our property like every day, like consistently. I was like, I didn't have a better pattern.
As a 2-year-old,
yeah,
and then gone.
I assume he didn't get
Weird,
killed,
man. Yeah, I don't know. And so I guess, yeah, in terms of my season wrapping up, I don't know. I'm excited about all the management stuff and things going on. As we were just talking about it, I'm trying to get this insurance stuff figured out, but hopefully next week, closing on this new farm. So I don't know. Like, yeah, man, I could throw up a camera. I know the previous landowner did communicate, not everything, but enough that there were a few mature bucks on that property going into gun season. Now, whether if they're still around or not, I don't know. But again, like, what do I do? Do I try to kill one of them now, or do I, like, he already made it through the season? Like, what could it be next year when I start planting and managing? And
you want me to help keep your expectations in check?
Yeah, I'm not gonna see anything.
I don't think they're there right now.
Where are they gonna go though? There's no ag anywhere.
Then maybe.
I mean, we have the most field in that area on the property. Again, it's just pasture grasses and some clover and a little bit of alfalfa and
what about cedars, pine trees? Is there like a big block of those somewhere?
No, in fact, the most thermal cover is probably on my place. There's a couple areas where these knobs kind of stick out that are some larger pine trees, but there's a lot of those places where those pine trees have laid down and it's thick.
Then maybe
that's be where I think I'm thinking. There is a swamp on the other side, on the public side. If you get down over the hill, there's a big swamp down in that bottom. I don't know if they'd be down there or not.
Yeah, I mean, that thermal cover is what you're looking for, or like a big food source. I've seen, so I got up like a week ago and I put some cameras back out on my place, and the only area that's holding any bucks worth noting is near a standing cornfield. They've just about abandoned everywhere else. And
we talked about that last time. It seems like, even a big brassica plot, or I've got like a big winter rye plot down in this bottom on the Kentucky lease. They're not there.
Yeah.
Like there's food there, but they're not there.
Yeah. Well, they'll move for sure. This time of year more than any other. Cause like in the summer, I guess I'm speaking about our place in Ohio. It's just how this lays out. There's all kind of food and there's plenty of summer bedding and stuff. And so they just choose to kind of summer on us, or, or you can imagine what type of property they would summer on. And then in the fall, it's like if you have good cover and stuff, they still have like adequate range and food and to rut and to eat acorns and all that kind of thing. But this time of year, a lot of that is gone. Like I made like an Instagram post the other day just commenting on how desolate it feels out there.
Yeah.
I mean, dude, especially on like an area like my farm, which most of it is, timber blocks. And even though we've done a bunch of TSI and stuff, if there is an option for those deer to travel a few miles and get into a good thermal cover setting, or to find a solid food source like standing corn, they're going to.
They're gone.
They'll leave.
Yeah.
They'll leave.
Yeah, it's crazy. There are...
and I don't think those small brassica fields, like I think I said on last week's podcast,
It doesn't do it.
It doesn't necessarily cut it. First of all, they're going to get hammered at some point. Like most of mine, I had some really good looking brassica plots this fall. They're all but.
I'm super like I've got a real kind of turmoil right now over food plots. Like I always felt really confident about what I had planned and what the strategy was, and and it's maybe it's again the mindset of changing from like drawing deer versus killing mature bucks, but like, man, I just don't see mature bucks using my food plots anywhere. Like early in the season for sure. Like they're coming through fields, or they're in, early season food plots. But like as the season progresses, maybe they're on an edge or something. I just don't see them feeding in a food plot. Just don't. I don't know.
I think it probably has something to do with,
like, I mean, take your brassica plots. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You've got 15, 20 does and fawns in a brassica plot, and some probably 1 and 2 year olds, but like there's no mature bucks out in that plot.
Well, I think that secluded bedding cover is way more important to a mature buck than any food source.
Agree.
That said, they need to eat.
They need to get there and they need to get food. Yeah,
they need to eat. But like if you think about those small brassica plots, it's like they don't have to eat that stuff like throughout most of like October, November, and by the time they do have to eat, like they need to eat. A lot of those brassica plots they're moving to those grain fields, pulverized. So they'll move, and you can find bucks this time of year. Like if you have a big food source like that, or you're in an area of thermal cover, that's where they'll be, because they have to.
It's really,
but in October, November, they don't have to, and so they'll choose that secluded cover over, even a good looking food plot.
Yeah, it's interesting, man. I mean, I think that so again, kind of if I fishtail that before we get in and give away winners, those kind of things, fishtail that into the Kentucky side, like this is 19, 20, 21. So this is we're completing the third season of having this farm in Kentucky, and the first 2 years, like I had seen some good bucks and some good shooters and some good up and comers, like right after gun season, gone, and never saw them again. Like 160 inch mainframe 10 with split G2s, gone. Like I know one of those deer, I should also say, like I know one buck, and it was like 135, 140 inch 8-point that I was hunting on my place that got killed by the neighbor. Other than that, and I'm talking like when I sit during rifle season and stuff, you don't hear a lot of shots. It's like, oh, there's one. That's a long way off. There's one. That's across the lake. But these deer were just gone. And so like instinctively, I'm thinking, okay, like they're moving off the property, it's 75 acres. They're moving off the property and they'll be back. They never came back, and like never saw them again. And now with access to my neighbor's property, I essentially have almost 300 acres that I cover, plus the public cameras that I have too. And the deer from years past, gone. So this year, when I got access to the neighbor's property, one of the first things that happened is I ended up kicking these trespassers off, neighbors of mine who were trespassing back there. And you know what? He's the guy who killed the 8-point that I was hunting a couple years ago. And I'd heard rumors like, maybe they're poaching. Like, I don't know. Like instantaneously, those guys are gone. And here we are in January. Every one of the bucks except for 1 or 2 that I had all season, I've got on camera. Every one of them. And like, yeah, maybe it's a coincidence that I'm running some cameras on the neighbor's property and I hadn't in years past, but on my farm, on my property, all of the same bucks are on the same cameras. And it's like, is it that coincidental, or is it the fact like maybe those guys were poaching, and like all of the deer that I had been watching, they literally were shooting or killing or shooting at or whatever. And that's why I never, but I'm telling you, like mature bucks year after year, those first 2 years, like I'd be like, man, that deer is going to be a monster next year. Gone. Never showed up again. Who killed him? Nobody. It's a 160 inch deer in a county that doesn't produce 160 inch deer. Like somebody shot him, somebody poached him, somebody did something.
Yeah.
And even the smaller bucks, like some of my 2-year-olds that I'm like, oh, that 2-year-old's going to be a great 3-year-old. Gone. I talked to the neighbor the other day. He's like, man, here's 2 10-points I watched last year. And I was like, I had those deer on camera. He's like, have you seen them this year? I'm like, no.
I wonder, because this phenomenon of, bucks reaching a certain age, and then along with that, like the requirements of secluded cover and stuff, I wonder how many of these deer are actually getting killed, and how many actually are just deciding to leave. It's just the pressure.
Agree.
The social pressure is there.
Yeah.
Whether that has to do with like your buck to doe ratio or just number of deer.
Could be me. We talked about that with I think Eric and Cody of like the use of the property, right? Like it could just be me being in that property now has not made them, but it just seems too coincidental that in the past years when I, had cameras and frankly, and especially after the season, like I had feeders full of corn, like these bucks didn't show back up. And now this year, like all of a sudden it's like, oh, there he is, he made it, there he is, he made it. And it's like, how's that possible?
Yeah, it would be a strange coincidence.
But I think to your point, and this is kind of how it was up until this year of figuring out those bucks lived is like, we talked about this with Shane of like, man, sometimes the knowing of what happened to a deer is just makes all the world of difference. Like this unknown thing is something that anybody that is monitoring deer, whether it's with cameras or you're hunting a lot or you have property, even if you're on public, doesn't matter, right? We talk about it in Kansas. We were talking about that shed there this morning. The monitoring of the deer and the unknown, when a deer disappears, there may not be anything worse in a hunter's feeling when he's watched a deer. And I don't even care if it's a good 2-year-old that you weren't planning on killing. Like when that deer just disappears and you have literally no idea, like, did he get shot? Did he just die? Did he get hit by a car? Coyotes eat him? Like, there's not much worse of that feeling because, part of you wants to hang on, just like this deer on the mountain that I was hunting the last 4 years. Part of me wants to hang on like, man, I don't know, maybe he just got pushed out. Maybe he got bullied out. He's still alive. The majority of yourself knows as a hunter and how these deer live in the wild and are fragile that, he's probably dead.
Yeah.
But some of the things that I had discussions with, we talked about this in Kansas. And somebody was commenting about the hills of Kentucky and stuff. That's where my property is. And I talked to the game warden down there, and he's like, man, you would be surprised how many of these giant bucks die of old age in hundreds of thousands of acres of forested ground along Daniel Boone National Forest in eastern Kentucky, because it's just vast wilderness. And, like, there's just not enough hunting pressure that kills them. They just die, and maybe it's rut worn, maybe it's a brain abscess, maybe it's an injury. Like, they just die. And I think it's really weird when we start to talk about following bucks from year to year. There's some that we get on camera and we're like, oh, that's so-and-so, no brainer. But even like an example on your farm not too long ago was like the waterhole buck. Like that buck was, wasn't a giant, but he was just, we knew that deer. And then, and that deer was very, very visible. And then it's like, I think this year we had a couple pictures and we're like, could that be waterhole? Like, I don't know. Like, if not, where the hell did he go?
Yeah, I don't know if we got any pictures of him this year. I think he's just gone. So that's what I'm saying, dude. And it happens all the time. I could name 10 bucks from last year that I was pretty sure made it and that were either 2, 3, 4 years old, and that I just don't know.
Yeah, where'd they go?
The fact that one showed up one time, for me anyways, gives some merit to this conversation about, like, are they just leaving? Are they going somewhere else? Is there somewhere better?
I think we underestimate, and we see this in some studies, especially in the South, man. I just don't know why we're not doing it in the North. But
dude, I would tell you, if you could put a collar on a deer and
that's what we're doing.
Let it run around your place.
In the South.
Yeah.
They're doing it. And they're seeing
that would tell
giant shifts. Like they're seeing, obviously we talk about these rut, ventures that basically these deer are taking and stuff. But we see, especially from spring, summer to fall, winter, like giant pickups in the range and shifts, that happen. But I just don't think, I think it's really hard for us to fathom, especially if you manage your property, to say like that deer is going to be here in whatever, July, August, September, early October, and then come late October, he's going to pick up and he's going to move 2 miles and he's going to plop his ass right here until next March or April. Yeah. And I think it's just hard for us to fathom that a deer would literally do that, pick up and move miles. I see it in the big country. We see it in Kansas and stuff, but... Well,
have they done that like on a annual basis? Like have there been anything 100%. Monitoring from 2 to 3 and then they leave at 4 or 5?
Yes. No. It tends to be a buck just by maybe not at 1, but by 2 and 3 is establishing a spring summer range and is establishing a fall winter range. And sometimes they overlap. but a lot of the times it's a complete transact.
I'm with you
between
on
the
that.
two.
That definitely happens. But what I'm suggesting here is that these bucks are like, they have a fall summer range as a 2-year-old, as a 3-year-old, and then at 4, that range starts to not be adequate for like their.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, it seems like when they're monitoring it,
That's what I'm saying. It's fine for them as a 2 and 3-year-old because they're I guess they'll tolerate like inadequate cover or cover that a fully mature buck may not prefer, and they're leaving.
Yeah,
was it Sturgis we were talking to that was saying that?
That's where he gets his depth of cover analysis. Right, is like here's food.
I just want to know how often that happens versus how often are they getting killed.
Man, and I think that
because dude, you can make some real decisions with that. If you're like, hey, they're leaving. Yeah. Okay, it's not a neighbor pressure issue. It's a habitat issue.
For the longest time, I don't care who you are listening to this podcast, I'm sure if a deer disappeared, right, you assume he got killed. Hunter killed him.
Yep.
Right? And that is, from a mortality standpoint,
they do die very frequently. It's hard for deer to make it to that age.
But I think ultimately, and I guess what's kind of brought me back into that mindset is it seems like people, and I don't know, like, again, I'm not here to bash the TV guys. We did that enough with Eberhard. But, like, there's a lot of people that are like, oh, yeah, like, this guy left when he was 4, now he's back when he's 7. And I'm like, really? Like, maybe. It just, like, by the time, if he leaves at 4 and I don't see him at 5 and I sure shit don't see him at 6, some bitch is dead in my mind.
Yeah.
But they're talking about him coming back at 7 or leaving at 3 and coming back at 6. And it's like, maybe, but like, I've never personally experienced, I have never had a deer.
I mean, it's definitely possible.
Yeah. I've never had a deer that I've lost at, let's say 3 or 4 that has come back at 6, or lost it even at 2 and 3 and come back at 5 or 6. It's just, I've never seen it.
Yeah. Yeah, but
have you ever seen a deer leave at 2 or 3 and then you're like, holy shit, that's that deer at 5 or 6? Maybe
not that exactly, but I have gotten like such infrequent sightings of bucks that it's realistic to think that maybe I missed it for a year or two. It's like, man, he only showed up in one spot and for like a week as a 3-year-old. And then like if I didn't have that camera running in the same spot at that same time for the next year or two, it's possible. I think for that to be the case, you probably just have to be on the far fringe or somewhere that they just very rarely go to.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess
which makes the chances of killing that buck like very slim. Unless, I mean, dude, I think there are things, human pressure is definitely one. Social pressure. I mean, like,
huge.
I guess I don't have proof of this, but it certainly makes sense that if you kill a mature buck out of an area, first of all, it's probably going to be a big area if it's holding a mature buck. If you kill him out of there, it seems like you would be making room for another buck, whether it's
sponge effect,
a 3-year-old to grow into that, or if another mature buck wanders in there and finds it and claims it. I don't know how often like that happens, but why wouldn't it?
Well, I mean, you see it.
Why wouldn't it?
You see it in the rut a lot. Like that 3 or 4-year-old buck gets his ass kicked by a 5 or 6-year-old buck. He's moving to the next area. That next area may be occupied by an inferior buck. He kicks that buck out, and this displacement continues to happen. But from a side of understanding, so like I'll use that buck on the mountain because it's my best case scenario. It was 1,000 acres. I feel like we were fairly on the fringe of his. It was probably half of his core area at least. 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old. Had that buck, like knew where he went for his summer. This is that giant that I was hunting up on the mountain the last few years. Knew where he came in the summer. Knew which camera I would get him on first.
Yeah, he's dead.
Knew where it would show there. Didn't show up this year. He's dead, right? He's not coming back next year. He didn't get pushed out and occupied a new area or something like that. But like, again, and even just thinking about some of the other bucks I've seen out there, like I just don't see these deer disappearing and being like, oh, he'll come back. And I'd love to think that, like, oh, we didn't see him, especially like I get it if it's we didn't see him in September, and usually he shows in September, and then he showed in October type of thing. But when you go a full year without seeing that deer, to think that he can come back, I don't see that happening.
I think a lot of it is dependent on like your surveillance, like, you know, how, because it's not just like he's there or he's not. It's like, do you walk in front of the camera? Did I have the camera in the right spot?
Well, and the cameras we talk about, we overhunt those, or we over acknowledge that data too much. I mean, they're great sources, don't get me wrong, but ultimately, if I only say like that deer exists or doesn't exist by camera,
yeah, it's not 100%. It's
not
like
100%.
It can only, yeah. So we have to first of all admit that like trail cameras can only capture a certain percentage. Yes, if a buck is there frequently, chances are we're going to get him at some point. But if he just, you know, every deer is different, and if he's just using a very specific piece of it or doing a certain thing, you know, and you're 100 yards off with your camera or something, you might not know. And so like I can see so much of deer hunting, I think, is perception. Like how many times recently have we heard people say like, yeah, a lot of guys thought it was a 150, it was a 120. Yeah, a lot of guys thought they were doing this, it was actually doing this. And so there's some pretty common misperceptions that may lead people to believe, you know, that buck disappeared for several years and came back. And another one there is it may not be the same buck.
I think that's a lot of cases.
Dude, in the same year, I've struggled to know, like, there's 2 8 points that look identical.
Well, dude, we just looked at one earlier today, pretty clear-cut 4-year-old, 140-inch 8-point. You got in October. He kind of disappeared there for a little bit.
Yeah.
Showed back up.
He's one of them. Well, dude, as a 3-year-old, we got him for a week. He showed up on the West Twin for a week. Brian saw him. I ended up getting some pictures because I had a camera there. And then he was gone. Never saw him again, never on any of our food sources. And then again this year, mid-October, shows up. I'm like, that's freaking him. Same general area. And, you know.
Disappeared at what?
Yeah, he didn't stay long. So I don't know where he spent most of his rut, October, November. But, you know, I'm trying to remember the last time I got him.
It's probably late October.
Yeah, it's been a while. So, yeah, he just showed back up like on a corn pile that I put out a week ago. And, you know, not only is it like surprising to see him, I suppose, he also looks like he's lost.
Looks like a 2-year-old.
Yeah. To be honest with you, if I hadn't seen that deer until just now, I would have said 3.
Yeah.
So he's probably 3.
Yep. Yeah, and I mean, that's cool because he obviously went somewhere. It's cool. He was there. He left. He came back. It also is frustrating because he left during the time where I want to kill him. So next year, as a 5-year-old, we don't want that deer to leave during late October through December because that's the time to kill him. So, like,
I almost wonder if this time of year, if they don't, like, get up and start looking for food sources. Like
and just going to new places.
Yeah, if they spent most of October, November, like in a deep wood setting, like just a hillside with a thicket,
and see that's
and they feel it getting cold, or they just know instinctively, like I need to.
Well, their bodies run down to shit at this point.
Yeah, because it's not the same every year. It's not like, oh, that corn pile is going to be there. Yeah, thermal cover, I guess, is pretty consistent. It's probably going to be there from year to year. I would be surprised if they don't get up. Like I said, I haven't seen that deer since like October. Maybe he was just bedding, you know, a mile away or something and did most of his rutting over there. And now he knows it's about to start getting cold and he needs to find a food source, and he just gets up and does some.
And very possible, which would be support my aspect, which is most of the places I hunt don't have large food sources. Yeah. So at this time of year, it's a frickin' desert.
Yeah.
You know, the bucks that are there are either, you know, hitting food plots and or supplemental feed or whatever. But most of those areas are desolate of deer because there is no food, right? There is no grains. There are.
Yeah. Well, and I got to think you can have probably a bigger impact than I can, you know, by introducing food in both your Ohio farm, if it sounds like it's primarily timber, and also Kentucky, because I've been there and I know that's what it is.
And I'm putting, it's not huge, but I'm at 1.5 acres of food on 28 acres behind the house, which is all timber. And like every one of these areas, that's kind of what, you know, you're there to keep me in line on it. But like this year, this year's all food for me. Because,
no timber at all?
I mean, I'm going to do a little bit of timber management. In fact, that's what that one out there is, a planting spade, because I'm going to order a bunch of conifers to put in. But yeah, so that'll be in Pennsylvania. But in Kentucky and Ohio, I won't even touch the timber in Ohio. Kentucky, we'll see. But it's definitely primarily food, right? Because I just, what I want to know is, like, without doing much to the woods in terms of timber stand improvement and stuff. And again, like there's just it's so massive. Like the timber in all of these places, including 28 acres in Pennsylvania behind it, it's just hundreds of thousands of acres of timber. And so if I plant the food, then I can understand, what that does to then change the timber to, essentially hold a deer or provide a little bit better bedding for does or whatever.
Yeah.
Because, we're talking about, even in Kentucky, it's 300 acres, 130 in Ohio, 30 in Pennsylvania. Like they're not going to hold deer. Like I just need them to at least feel comfortable enough to slow down as they move through those properties to potentially kill them. But I think food is the missing element from all of them out of the gate, Where I think in your area, there's food everywhere. You're in farm country.
Yeah. I don't know.
I'm not in farm country anywhere.
Yeah. You got to sometimes just take a close look and try to figure out what they're eating. Like, yes, this year there's that standing cornfield, and I'm seeing deer kind of move to it, but that's not always the case. A lot of times everything gets picked, and my food plots get decimated, and so I don't know sometimes like what they end up eating. I've definitely seen like in years where it got really, really cold for a stretch of time, I noticed like a migration to a giant pine tree farm. Because I know they'll
thermal
eat that
covers.
stuff.
Well,
they'll eat them too. It's white pines.
Yeah, that's why I'm doing that. I'm going to order essentially 500 seedlings from PA Game Commission, and I'm going to go through and essentially cut a bunch of timber down, and then in those hard to reach areas, go in and scatter plant.
I like that.
Pines through there. And then that'll be kind of my test run to see how does that work to apply. Like I said, in Ohio, the cool thing is there's a couple, 3 really that I know, maybe 4, 3 primary knobs coming off the, I guess that would be the north side, north facing south, that have pines on those points, and where like some of them have fallen down. It's just thick and nasty. Now, it's not as good as like a low-lying white pine or spruce or something, but I could go into those areas and plant those smaller, fuller trees to provide that kind of thermal cover on there. And I think that people underestimate that thermal cover because it's not just used in December, January, February. It's used throughout the year. In the summertime, keeping in mind you need some spacing from the velvet side so it's not high stem densities, that shade is cool, and especially if there's a seepage by a creek or something, that cool area is where those bucks want to lay so that they're not sweating their ass off.
Yeah. I don't know exactly, but like what I've noticed is it seems like the bucks like to summer on our place because we have a lot of cool season grasses, and so not warm season grasses, which like Sturgis will subscribe. That's like switchgrass and stuff. But cool season grasses is lays flat in the fall, so it's not a good thing to have on your property necessarily. But we have it, and a lot of it grows with a tall story, and so they get shade from that. And they have like this summer cover with, the breeze will blow through there and stuff. And it seems like I like that. Like by the tin shed and stuff. That's what we have.
Well,
there.
And it's not like saplings and stuff that are smacking off their velvet.
None
like
of
they
that.
can go right through grass pretty easily.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's something that, again, you want to be able to appeal to these deer all year. Yet like that critical piece is October, November, December, and then January. And you've basically protected and or influenced them as much as you can. But like then you think about, essentially February to August when they either are recovering from the rut and wintertime and their bodies are shit, or we're trying to, pack in protein for antler growth and fawn recruitment. Like, how is it possible to truly influence a herd year round? And I don't know. It may be from a whole, but I don't know if you think of an individual buck, that buck is going to commit himself to your property year round. I just don't. I think he's in it at some point, and he's there, but maybe he's there the summer and then he leaves during the hunting season, or he's there during the hunting season and he's not there during the summer. And so I think it's just you have to accept that at some point you're going to influence certain deer by protecting them and or having the ability to kill them in the hunting season. And then maybe a completely different set of deer and bucks you're going to be able to influence via late season food sources and trying to help repair their body and prepare for, better antler growth.
Well, and
And I don't think they're the same. There are very few deer that probably overlap that boundary together.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I could name basically on my hand the number of deer that I knew were around in March, April, May, June, July, August even, and then the number of bucks that stayed October, November, December. This is not a lot.
Well, and I know in states like Ohio too, where the season is really long, you know, the longer season you have, the harder it is to be, you know, this herd influencer, because that season goes clear through the late season, which is a really critical point.
This is January 5th. The 8th to the 11th is muzzleloader season. And
the bow season is until
February.
First week of February.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So I think that's what people have to realize is, like, you're almost appeasing, like, if you can find those overlap deer that you influence through spring, summer, growing antlers, and then also influence because you either are protecting and or hunting them, like, those are the deer you need to focus on. The deer that, in terms of, like, can I make this deer a better deer? The deer that are only there during the hunting season, you may not be affecting their nutrition as much to say that you can affect them to be bigger deer or better deer.
You know, I had a thought the other day, just kind of based around this. Dude, it almost seems like it would be worth, you know, like I hate to get too crazy or, like, you know, start pressuring our farm too hard, like early in the season, just because I'm always like, I'm hopeful that it's like, man, you know, October is really the time to do this. Or, dude, I almost wonder if I should just have all of our guys over and let's throw everything we got at them, like, the first week.
That's probably what it is.
The first week. And hopefully that overlaps with some kind of a weather front. Because just like October, I do still think that, you know, after a rain front or something, if you can get a cold weather snap, that still is going to encourage some earlier movement. But if I can frankly align that on, like, some bait piles and different stands and stuff, and just say, let's give it a crack here this first couple of days. Because, you know, they're leaving anyways at some point. So why not just...
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think, like, the way that your farm, not the farm you killed your buck on this year, but your personal farm sets up, you're influencing the nutrition and the quality of those animals a lot, because from January, February through September, you're the one providing the food, shelter, etc.
Or the surrounding ag is, yeah.
Yeah. Come October, November, you're not, other people are benefiting from...
Yeah, they're not there.
The input from your farm,
right?
Essentially. So it's a weird thing, because it's hard to be like, man, like, I really want to do this, this, and this, because it's influencing deer that, frankly, you may never harvest or have a chance at harvesting, versus these deer that are here or not there in some cases in October through January, where it's like, all right, like, maybe these deer weren't here in the summer and I didn't, you know, contribute to their nutrition and stuff, but these are the deer that I have a chance to either protect for another year and or hunt. And I think it's hard for people to understand the concept there of, like, those deer you may never see until hunting season. So the only effect that you have on those deer is pass or shoot. That's it. And then outside of that is a whole bunch of deer that you may never have a chance to pass or
frankly
shoot.
Is the most important thing. Probably.
Yeah, 100%. Well, and that's where
age is the biggest
I think
factor.
we get hung up a lot on the like, strategy. Like, you and I are doing this right now. The strategy of what are we planting and when's this for and how's this and contributing that. Like, ultimately there's a short time period, which is pass or shoot, and those deer are likely very different than the deer that are benefiting from all of the other plantings that you're doing. And I think that's why it's important to either pick a property where the surrounding properties can provide for those deer that eventually come onto your place during the hunting season, or you have to really manage your expectations to understand, like, it doesn't matter what you plan or what you do. Ultimately, the deer that you're probably going to have a chance at killing aren't necessarily the deer that are consuming all the protein that you planted, or, you know, whatever, all the late season food sources to build up their body at the end of the year.
Yeah.
And that's a tough thing for, I think, people to understand. I think as you create quality bedding, you know, so as we transition from food to bedding, you increase your chances of the deer that you are providing nutrition for sticking around during that hunting or pass or shoot protection period. And we see that. I mean, there's certain deer that you and I both have had in the summer that if we wanted to or we tried to, we could have killed in hunting season.
Yeah.
But it's a fraction of the total of bucks that we ultimately see throughout the year.
Yeah.
Those are the home bodies.
Well, and like this year's been kind of eye-opening with access to several different types of property in the same area, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those deer gain, or I'm sorry, some of those properties gain deer in October, November, and the other ones, they lose them. And it's pretty easy at this point, dude. That's why I feel pretty confident. Granted, I haven't seen your farm in Ohio, and so I could be wrong, but it seems like those types of property, like whether it's
they're desolate at this point.
Yep, it's a timber property. It's it's got open pasture and stuff. Those are great in the summer. As long as there's good summer food source, bedding is readily available and stuff. Those are the types of properties that lose deer in November. And the property that I killed my buck on this year didn't have a buck. Well, there was one buck, but frankly, he left, and we didn't wait to see him the whole hunting season. I don't know what happened to him. None of these other bucks, of which there's been several, 160 plusers, some 3-year-olds and stuff. None of those deer started showing up until November. In fact, if you listen to the pod where I was talking about killing that deer, I was like getting frustrated because I was like, this is an awesome property. It's just thicket with some secluded food plots and stuff. I was like, how is there not a shooter on this? It's not possible. So I went in and I freshened up. Actually, what I did is I went and I chose the spot. I was like, I could kill a deer here. I put a corn pile there. I've got a camera. And right away, within hours, I was like, there's a shooter. Which there's an undertone there of like what corn piles do to Ohio. There's a big influence there.
Sure.
Whether you're for them or against them.
Yeah, you saw it.
So regardless, I don't think that those deer, either the one that I went in to hunt, that 160-10 point, or the one that I ended up killing, the 170-12 point, were there until like right around that time that I killed. And it wasn't exclusively because of habitat either. It was that buck that I killed was there because he knew it was a thicket. He knew that there were does living there, and he knew that food plot was there and that does would likely be feeding it. And so he came to it from wherever he was bedding, maybe on the property, because it is a giant thicket.
Probably felt a little bit secure about it.
He at least came in and was, going to spend some time there.
Man, and it's so critical as we start talking about, going into 22 with our existing properties, new properties coming into the fold. I think that is the hardest part for any of us as hunters. Like undeniably hard to think of. Your property may be way better than you think it is, even if right now,
or way worse.
through the summer, you don't have any deer on it.
Yeah.
Way worse because you're like, man, look at all these deer I got now. Or this summer, like I was out in the field and you see all these bucks, and then come hunting season, there's not shit.
I think one of the most important things, first of all, like you said, not every property is going to hold deer year round. These mature bucks are different animals.
Different.
Like, and I was one of those guys that was like, hey, there's a lot of deer here. Like, I'm sure when they get older, they're mature. I don't think it necessarily works that way.
I think that social stress plays a lot bigger role on mature deer than it does anything else in the deer hunting or deer management picture.
For sure.
They just don't want to walk out in the field with 27 other deer. They just don't want to do it.
Yeah. Well, and when they're bedding, they don't want to be anywhere near other deer. They want to be secluded in their castle somewhere, secluded, laying sign.
And if you've seen that, if you ever bump, and I'm sure we all have, if we bump a mature buck, he's usually by himself, unless he's doed up. All right, he's usually by himself. It's usually like in a thick, nasty seclusion, and when you go there, I mean, he's tore the whole damn place apart, and it's just him. It's just one giant bed. There's not little doe beds all around him. There's not another buck bed over here.
Because there will be. If you go to a property, like, anywhere in the whitetail range, there's a good chance there's going to be at least one doe family group or several of them. And then
absolutely, because
of that, they're having fawns and stuff. You're going to see deer, you'll be like, oh, there's a small buck and stuff. There may or may not be mature bucks in on that property. In my experience.
And this really happens when we talk about this. This isn't a spring and summer discussion, right? This is starting to September when they shed out and they start to have testosterone levels rise. Like you could see 2 5-year-olds bedded side by side in July or August.
Mm-hmm.
They don't care, right? They don't care that they're hanging out and eating in the soybean field together. As that testosterone level starts to, and resources at the same time start to deplenish, they get testy, right? And they want to segment themselves out. And so I think that's where a lot of people have a hard time, processing it. Is they're like, well, I don't know. Like I saw four bucks that were at least 4 years old in this field, all summer. And it's like, yeah, those guys are in 4 different corners of the vicinity at this point.
They don't want to see other deer. Like that's yes, they're seeking out does to breed and stuff. But
that's the misconception there is they're like, well, but look at all the does I have. And they're like, to a point during a small time frame.
Well, but maybe they're not even doing that. I mean, you talk to a guy like Ben Rising.
Yeah, Ben doesn't think that they're searching out at all.
They're not searching. They'll hold up in their castle and them does
they'll be there.
They'll be there. Which makes
sense because again, like I have seen some, but like in that process, especially the first doe or so into estrus, but most of the time, like I don't see those big 5 and 6 year old monarchs chasing. Like they're not
very often.
They're like, oh, there he is, the 200 this year. I didn't see a chase all year. Sitting in my stand, I hear that grunt, I look and I'm like, there he is. Damn thing is guarding
what they
that
are
doe
doing.
from another one.
Yep, they're laying sign. They're vocal in some cases.
They're defending their does.
They're just making us. I'm here. This is who I am. This is my area, and them does that are in there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
just magnets. Yeah, and so I think it's really weird when you start to kind of plan forward as whether this is your existing property, you're looking to buy, you're looking to lease, doesn't matter. When you start to think about a property. Number one, and this is the, again, you're probably right. In Ohio, like I wouldn't be surprised if I walk on there and it's a desolate place. Like there's no food. Like what are they? Grasses, maybe. I'm sure there's does and stuff. But if you think about that October, November time period, and I love late season scouting. This is where this is going. But when you can walk onto a piece of property, and especially a new piece of property, in late October, early November, and there is active buck sign. Like it is laid down.
Yeah.
You're in the right place.
Yeah.
There are plenty of places like your farm that if anybody looked at your trail cameras from August to September, they're like, Jesus, like that. I don't understand how Jared doesn't kill 150 every year. Yeah. It's because the moment late October hits, there's no buck sign.
Yep.
It's dead, dry. Like early October scrapes, dry.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you get into this late season, and you and I are going to be doing a ton of late season scouting. There's a rub, there's a scrape. Like it's good. Like there was definitely a period of probably late September to December that deer was there. But if it's not really fresh, like you can't make any assumptions on what's going on there. Like when I walked that Ohio farm, it was November 4th or something. So when I'm seeing an active sign, I'm like, okay, they're here. Like maybe not like right now, but like they were here within the last 24 hours. There's a fresh rub. There's scrapes. These scrapes were just hit. And like, so you know at least that you're in the game, right? There are other farms, and there's people probably listening to this, and I hate to like make you feel bad, but you're going to walk out on your farm in late October, November, after you probably watch bucks in September, and you're going to be like, there's not an active scrape and a rub. Or nothing. I mean, for the longest time, you and I talked about it. You're like, man, yeah, bucks just don't rub on my farm. And I'm like, what? Like,
yeah, you're like, yeah, no, they're not there.
Yeah, they're not there. Like, that's why you're not seeing the sign.
That seems to be the biggest difference, at least, in my part of Ohio. What I've seen is that these, either the big timber or, big thicket type of properties are, those are fall properties, deer hunting properties. Yeah. My property.
Unless it's,
got
UTV traffic every day.
Yeah, that doesn't help, obviously. Yeah, it's got to be.
But there were bucks there, just not mature bucks.
Well, and like, so, Jed is somebody that I use as a
great example.
A comparison is he doesn't have any bucks throughout the summer at all.
Nothing.
And but right when mine start to leave, mid-October.
There they are.
He's like, there's a booner. There's a booner. There's a booner. And it's like, it's cool because Jed's a friend of mine and I'm excited.
It's discouraging, though.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you're doing, by the book, I would say that you're doing everything right with your farm,
dude,
though.
No.
From a habitat standpoint.
No, not even that. There's always more to do, but, like, when I look at my property at this point, I'm like, okay, even though we've done all of this TSI, there's not nearly enough cover to constitute like the seclusion that a mature buck needs.
Right. It's these islands.
Yes, there's good bedding. Yes, there's, little thickets kind of here and there, but I think they're just primarily occupied by doe family groups and 2 and 3 year old bucks, which we do have. And that's it. That's all I can like sustain. Because then at that point, I think they leave. Well,
and I think that's where, like I get down on myself a lot on my properties because I'll see bucks, and it's flashes here, flashes there. I usually don't see anything in the summertime. It's October and then November when things happen. But it's because I've got miles of timber, right? That these mature bucks can bury themselves in, where I've lacked up until this point on the 2 properties I have access to, and probably in the new property of acquisition, is the food to keep them around in that October to November period, bumping does, or at least interested in it. What I see, even on my 30 acres in Pennsylvania, is like, I'll see nothing, then it's like, boom, there's a 4-year-old, boom, there's a 5-year-old.
And it's like second week in November usually, right?
Cruising through, and they may stay for 3 or 4 days, and then they're out.
So I have something else on that. I think that they will, like in the spirit of our conversation of those bucks not having to chase and stuff, I think that they will, if they can, they'll just find the best bedding cover
just shift
possible. Yeah, but then once they've bred all those does in those areas, which they know when they're coming in, per our conversation with Ben, I think they'll just go to the next one. They'll be like, I'm going to go to my other area of secluded bedding thicket, and these does are going to then come to me.
Yeah, because, those deer come in, I'll see them for maybe a week at the most. 2 of those bucks will be consistent. One of those bucks will be like flash in the pan type of thing. And then they're gone. And then I may see them show back up in late season because they know there's a food source there. They're just cruising through or whatever. And that's fine. Like there's enough of a chance. Hell, this year, I had a real nice 10 and a pretty solid 8 show up like right in the middle of the day. And I was out of this office in that stand, and I saw them for one more time and then a couple more times for the 10, and then they're gone. Yeah. So they move in. And so the thought process then from a management side is, cool, what can I do to just delay that leaving a couple days? That's all you need, right? Because it's just timing it right. If they're there, it's just right place, right time at that point. But the sooner they leave, the sooner you're out of the game. And so I think as you start to leave, and the hard part with a place like yours is because it's so fragmented from a landscape side, frankly, there's not much you can do. Kind of is what it is.
As far as what?
Your woodlots and like the pressure and these bucks just don't be around.
But it's a
long-term
long
process.
road. Yeah, that's your
giant thicket reclaimed pasture
restoration stuff.
Yeah,
that's where even now I'm torn. Having talked to guys like Sturgis, who I have a lot of respect for, and also like Craig, who I also have a lot of respect for. They have 2 different approaches to that. One is a small property, short, quick turnaround.
Yep, overnight success
type of a result, and which would be great. Who doesn't want to get rich quick? It's the best way to get rich. Versus, quote unquote, like the right way to do, the natural way to do it, which takes several years.
Yep.
Basically, I'm talking about switchgrass versus seedbed.
Yep. Yeah, and it's so tough, man. And it's where,
but that is that's the crossroads. Though.
That is.
That's what we're going to do to my farm. So there's not a whole lot else I can do with the timber other than we'll probably do a timber harvest.
And there's not much you can do for food. You got a lot of food.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a food issue. Although I do think I need more food. I need more food.
You do?
And I need more cover. Well, because dude, I'm looking at this time of year, like that corn.
Is it different types of planting versus acreage? Do you think?
What?
Like, do you think you actually need more acres of planting?
Yeah.
See, what's crazy about that
I could do with less in terms of quantity, but bigger food plots.
I'll pull in the theoretical side here for a second. So when we were going through schooling and stuff, and this is in the deep south, right? We would look at a piece of property and they basically say, how much supplemental food sources, food plots should we put on a piece of property? Most equations basically said 2 to 3% of that property.
Okay.
So if you had 100 acres, you need 2 to 3 acres of food plots, essentially. I'm just saying, and keep in mind that you're managing the timber in aspect of that. I wonder if your need for more acreage of food is because essentially there's a lot less cover. So you're trying to offset less cover with more food?
Let's do the math. If let's say it's 1,000 acres. It's not quite that, but let's say it's 1,000 acres. You said 2 to 3%. So I need 20 or 30 acres of food. Yeah, so I'm planting.
Well, but I'm talking about all your crop too.
Yeah, but that's only in the summer. It's gone after mid-September, October in some cases. I guess it depends.
Yeah,
corn gets picked first week of November sometimes, but regardless, I can go out there right now and tell you that those food plots have been wiped.
So how much do you think it just? Let's take
I
out
planted
crops.
I planted like acre and a half. I planted like 3 acres of beans. As of
those get pretty annihilated.
Mid-December, they're gone.
Yeah.
Yep. I planted, I don't know, let's say 5-6 acres of brassicas, maybe. Pretty much gone. And these did really well. Had a lot of beans and pods on the beans. Had a lot, giant tubers on the.
And they're dug up. They're eating the hell out of them.
Yep. Dude, same with that property that I killed on.
Which is so weird because, frankly, we've had a super mild December.
Yeah.
Just lack of food out there. Doesn't matter about the weather. Just lack of food, period.
Yeah. So, that's what I'm looking at to say I need more food. But in addition, I don't have, none of that food's getting eaten by mature bucks on my property. So I'm also lacking that secluded cover. So like in a perfect world, let's say on this 1,000 acres, 400 of it is timber, 600 of it is ag or
old pasture
ground. In a perfect world, I would go in and add 200 acres of thicket in the form of switchgrass or
pasture
early successional management. I think that would give us the cover, to constitute some secluded bedding areas that mature bucks would use. And to complement that, we need more, maybe not in quantity, but bigger food sources, especially for this time of the year.
Well, anytime you're going to add food or add cover, you're going to add deer, you need more food.
Yep. Does that sound right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. Like, I think in the current situation, without adding more cover, I don't know, because, again, here we are in January. I don't know if you really need to add more food to kill mature bucks. Maybe just to appease the deer herd. Yeah, potentially. But to kill mature bucks, you don't need more food right now, I don't think.
I bet it would help. I bet if I had like a 10-acre standing bean field right now with pods on it,
I would agree with that.
Even though I don't have that premier secluded bedding area, those bucks have to eat. There comes a time where food outweighs cover. I think even to a mature
that's why,
buck.
like, even in the last week and a half in Kentucky, I've gone from seeing like this 3-year-old, this 4-year-old, this 2-year-old, this 3-year-old to now these 2 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds are together. Here they are together. They're eating, and then they're out together.
Yeah,
they're grouped back up.
Yeah,
whereas 2 weeks ago, guy came in, he left. Hour later, this guy came in, he left.
So there you go. There's a trick for late season food. I think if you have crappy cover on your place or you're not holding deer throughout the fall, if you plant a giant late season food source,
you'll kill. Yeah, you'll bring a buck.
You'll pull a buck in.
I would agree with that.
But to have him there in October and November, you need the cover.
Well, and see, that's where, there's an excitement on this new farm in that I've got 10 acres, give or take, 8 to 10 acres of tillable ground through the gut and up in front.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And then I've got all this big cover around it. Yeah. What I don't know.
8 or 10 acres is substantial.
Yeah.
What are you going to plant in there?
I'd love to plant like a big 2 to 3 acre bean field right in the gut. Up front, I'm going to do I'm going to do switchgrass because it is like road frontage a little bit.
Okay.
I'm going to do switchgrass to block the road. I'm thinking about doing a chunk of corn and then a little like island of brassicas or something in the middle of it.
Just for diversity?
Yeah, well, I'll end up probably mowing that corn down come gun season or something.
So
this is going against Jeff's recommendations, though.
Of?
Keep it all the same.
Yeah. Well, and I just don't know.
I don't know. I've literally stepped foot on this property one time, and I'm just twitching at this point, but that's my initial plans.
I would love to know, like, a direct comparison if you're going to do beans versus brassicas, because I like them both.
Yeah, in a perfect world, I would actually do corn, like just an outline of switchgrass, right? Just visual blocking and get me access to probably hawk box blind. Some sort of corn, because I just want a little bit more buffer between switchgrass and road, and then maybe a bean field on the inside, like a 2 acre bean field on the inside. and then just leave that stand. And if I see, the one thing that I want is, and then this is me as a bow hunter.
Well, dude, if you could,
how do I get them close to that like box blind potentially for me or the kids? Like, if I'm in a 2-acre bean field, do I want to make a smaller half-acre brassica closer to the blind, or a green field, or win a rye field?
It's Ohio, bro. Put a corn pile there.
Yeah, that's true.
You'll learn. Well, just so for argument's sake here, why not just do like a strip of switch in the front, and then either a 7-acre bean field or a 7-acre brassica field?
Because it's only 3 acres up front. So I got 3 acres in the front, then I've got a couple small plots, then I got about a 2-acre bigger field, and then about a half-acre back field. So there's wood lots.
Oh, that's cool.
So it's kind of, so if you think about it on the front, it's 3 acres in the front, and that's where the road is, right? And it's across the road. I have a little bit of chunk of property across the road, and that includes this big field.
Yeah.
Then you go kind of up the valley through my property. Big woods on both sides.
Yep.
Fingers, draws coming down. And in that valley, you've got a couple small plots, maybe 1/4 acre here, 1/2 acre here. Then you got about a 2+ acre big field in the middle. And then like right at the end, there's a tree line. And then at the like head of the holler basically is a 1/2 acre food plot too.
Okay. I mean, regardless of the layout, like how do we feel about like just literally brassicas versus beans? And I think those are the two that are in the running, because we're looking at
I'm
October, November, December, January, February.
So
why not just give, especially because in your situation here, and a lot of people have limited acreage to plant.
Yes.
Why not just choose the crop or the plant that is going to provide the most food? Attractability has a point of it too, but I think they're both attractive, especially in a big wood setting.
So what is that? Beans?
I would have guessed brassicas.
So this goes back.
It's got to be.
Well,
brassicas are known for putting on the most tonnage per acre.
This goes back to.
But I like beans.
Am I trying to influence deer?
And I know guys do both
For the year.
A lot
or
of
am I
guys
trying
do
to
both.
influence the deer for 3 months, 2 months?
I think it's 3 months.
Yeah, and I go back and forth in brassicas so much because like in my head I'm like, yes, tonnage of food, high quality protein, easily digestible. From a huntability standpoint, I do think it limits me. We talked about this with Harper, and actually we talked about it this morning, is like there is a point where those, for some reason, get more attractive than September, October. Like November, December. At some point, the deer start to really feed on those. So am I missing out on October by having 6 acres of brassicas? You don't think so?
I mean, I think they're going to be on beans.
Well, keep in mind,
I'm sorry, on acorns.
I was going to say, keep in mind, I've got a substantial oak system on this
I don't
property.
think they're going to leave acorns to eat brassicas or beans.
Okay.
Where were we at exactly?
Okay, so we're talking this beans brassicas side of things. So, yeah, and here's the disadvantage going into year one is, unlike maybe your property, where I think you would rather put more effort to keeping the deer during the hunting season because it seems like they're just there during the summer. Like, I don't know how to influence my deer herd yet.
Well, now that we're talking about it, like if you would ask me straight up, like why are you deciding to plant beans as opposed to brassicas in some of these plots? I don't really know.
I mean, there are certain things I like about beans.
Well, I will say this. The one thing that beans can give you is an early season opportunity. Brassicas will not give you that.
Correct. But, say early season in Ohio, at least in the case that we're talking, maybe a week before those beans start to turn and those deer lay off of them.
Yeah, but I think they come back around fairly quick. I mean, they'll start eating them again in October, the pods.
Yeah.
They're a great food source. They'll eat those beans.
To your point, though, you're right. I mean, if you've got a heavy acorn crop in October, they're probably not eating the bean pods.
What I've seen is if you have a good, like a forage bean, which I'm not an agronomist, I don't necessarily know the difference, but a bean field that is green into the month of October, which, I plant them real world beans, and they typically are.
Yep.
There's a period there where they're eating those beans before they leave to go eat acorns.
Yeah, and that's my struggle is because, from a hunting situation, this is, I want to we'll fishtail into this.
But even in November, dude, they'll go and eat those red oaks. Like these acorns are not like a one.
Oh, I know.
It's like whites from mid-September to mid-October, and then mid to late November is red oaks.
Well, and that's kind of how I'm like. The nice thing is I've we'll get into the breakdown of this new property at some point, but like I'm accessing east to west, which is cool because prevailing wind should be southwest, northwest, something like that. That eventually, like, I'm actually walking into the property into the wind, right? Versus, coming out my back.
Which I've recently maybe is happening with our property because of those leases ending.
I know. I was gonna touch on that. Yeah, I was gonna touch on that here in a second about your uncle's place and being pasture restoration.
Oh, yes. So there's a conversation there. There's still going to be cows for a couple of years. So I don't know.
But eventually. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so I come east to west in. So obviously, like, the ridges on both sides are oaks. I could go straight up the middle, cut up the top, have wind in my favor, hunt the oaks. What I'm trying to figure out is, number one, you got to locate where these deer are actually traveling back to from a bedding standpoint. But, like, when you have a food source, like, this is going to literally be almost, like, right up the gut of the property. What are you trying to accomplish there? Because some of the smaller plots could be hunting plots. That bigger plot is more of a destination type thing. Like, I guess when you're in that October to November standpoint, do I want to get in between bedding and that food, which is going to be the oak transition area, probably? That's probably going to be my best place to kill a mature buck.
Yeah, so like it almost seems like you have to decide. You can't have it all. Like,
that's where we're going with this.
You know what I mean? I don't think you can, because like that type of thing you're talking about is not necessarily a secluded brassica and rye plot like in a thicket.
Mm-mm.
It's not going to set up the same as where I killed my buck this year.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't seem like that. Anyways, it's going to be more of a destination. It's big.
Both of them. Yeah, all of the food sources that I will have are going to be more destination. There's one area I might get a more secluded, like winter rye plot, but yeah, most of it's going to be the deer are coming into these plots. I need to get in between where they're coming from and those plots to kill them versus being just on them.
Yeah. Winky had some interesting, like,
because that's how his property's set up.
Conversations. He's always been one of those guys that's like, he acknowledged that issue and he was like, well, if I get between them and the food source, first of all these other deer have to come past me,
mm-hmm.
and they're going to end up smelling me.
Mm-hmm.
And so his like strategy to beat that was to get on the opposite side of the food source, to where the deer are never getting past them, but it may take them longer to get there.
Yeah, you'll miss, it'll be dark for some of those bigger bucks to
make
it there.
I think he had some luck with it. I think that's where he ended. And I would guess that in a state like Ohio where you can bait, that strategy is going to be even more effective, because in a big food source like that, whether it's corn pile or you want to do like a scrape,
mm-hmm.
And I know is another way
mm-hmm.
to bring them into a very specific spot. You may want to just consider that, man. Having a box blind on the far downwind side of your food source and having some way to track them to that point.
Well, and that's something I was getting into more is, because this is more recreational, unlike even our Kentucky place. Like, we're not going to be actively like using and hiking and doing things on this property as much. Is like it's going to be fairly unpressured. How do you hunt it without like getting too aggressive to it? Like, very well, yeah, you could have a couple key stands that you can easily access and play the wind right, and like that's it, and you don't go deeper, you don't push deeper into that property.
It's tough. It's tough when you have big food source up front like that. It can be great when you're hunting that food source,
mm-hmm.
but to hunt anything else on the property,
mm-hmm.
it's hard.
Yeah, because ultimately those deer are going to that food source, whether they're cruising an oak flat or not. Because that's the other thing this thing's got is both sides and the back are like really cool, like big white oak and red oak plateaus almost. And so like you could see what it does is it dives off the side and it's just like just gnarly thick hillside. And those deer are just coming up. They're coming on that flat and then they're going to drop right down in this big food source.
Well, the flat's where you want to be then. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
See, that's way better than my property. Most of it is they're bedding on a hillside, they drop down into a bottom, and then they come back up to the food source.
Yeah.
And the problem is that wind always will pull
mm-hmm.
with the thermals and
mm-hmm.
swirl down in this bottom. So it's a perfect staging area for them because they can almost see their final destination here. And by the time they get to the bottom, their smell is going to confirm anything.
Yeah. And there's a point of some aggressiveness. Like there's this one knob.
We're just going to have to go walk it, dude.
Yeah. There's this one knob that got hit by the tornado that's like just jungle thick, right? And then like it's kind of flat.
This recent tornado?
It's like 8 or 9 years ago.
Okay. Not.
No. Yeah. Like 8 or 9 years ago. So it's thick, man. It's a fucking jungle up there. And then there's some just like real nice oaks on the border. Then it drops down into the valley to the creek, and then that creek is where the big food source is. And so you can approach that thing with the wind. You could get up in there. You could catch them coming out of that thick stuff and dropping down to the food source. It's just, to Winky's point, you're going to have some deer that get past you probably before the right deer comes by. Just have to play that wind correctly.
It almost sounds like you're going to have some issues accessing like further parts of that food source, just line of sight. Like if they're bedding on them ridges.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, so I'm hoping to, do as much as I can with like a switchgrass line to try to give me some cover. The one thing that is right along that food source that goes right up through the middle is a creek. Runs right next to it. So I'm going to just cut that creek and hopefully be able to walk that entire creek the whole way up. And it's tree lined and then just pop up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it almost seems like, I mean, if you have the ability to hunt multiple properties, whether own permission, lease,
just don't pressure.
Well, and you should try to set them up for like its optimal condition. So if you go and a property is, let's say like mine, it's cool season grasses, ag country, small blocks of timber, you should probably try to play it to your favor and try to kill a buck there on opening day. Mm-hmm. Chances are there's one there. That's going to be that's ideal time to hunt that property. Conversely, you find a property that's a cedar thicket, and it, has tillable ground to put a late season. Mm-hmm. I would say that type of a property may also be conducive to a fall rut hunting property, but definitely is going to hold deer in the late season. Mm-hmm. So maybe you look at that property and say, okay, this is a late season property. I'm gonna do everything I can to get good late season food here, and I'm gonna set it up for, so that these bucks aren't seeing me off the ridges and stuff. And then somewhere in between, if it's a thicket, not every property is only one or the other.
Well, that's what I'm saying is I think you can diversify, and it's not going to be like an all the time go to, but like, let's say you got a big destination food source like this Ohio place in the early season, just because of the way the ridges and the thickets set up, like this deer could be bedded in a lot of different places, right? Like don't get down deep, maybe stay back, whatever.
I wouldn't hunt it.
Why wouldn't you hunt it?
Because you have other places to go.
Where?
Ohio, Kentucky.
Yeah. Maybe.
If it's the only place you have, then yeah. But what I'm saying, and this is the dark side of deer hunting and keeping pressure off, is like, dude, if you could, and this you're like, okay, there's this buck. I've got 2-3 years of history. Mm-hmm. He's rutting on his property, or he's hitting my food source starting December. Mm-hmm. Let him have that and go kill him when he's there, and try to stay off the property. Like,
that's the hardest part. Yeah. Well, and I think that goes back to like this beans brassica discussion, right? Is like both of them are great sources of protein.
I'd love an answer to that.
Yeah, both of them I think are really good in that November, December, January timeframe, right? As long as there are still pods on the beans. Beans do have an advantage that if the bucks are there in summer, you're providing protein to them. Mm-hmm. In the summertime, you're not getting that from brassicas.
Well, and so that doesn't seem like it matters as much to me. Like
in terms of killing a big buck.
Or just in terms of anything. Like it seems like they can find summer food.
In your area. In these big woods?
I think in the big woods too. I think it's just going to be clear-cut areas. They're going to eat briars and...
Yeah, and I mean, they've got good nutrition. Yeah, I mean, that's one of my fears.
That's Sturgis's argument. He's like, why are you managing for the deer in the summer? It doesn't matter. They're going to find food.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I don't think that you're going to feed a deer...
If you can do both, great. But don't give up influencer period food for summer food.
I don't think you're going to... if you're in a wooded area like a lot of my places are, and I might plant beans, I don't know, but... two things. Number one is I don't think that a 2-acre field is going to sustain through the summer. They're going to just mow it.
Yep.
It's going to be gone.
Well, it will. It'll be gone by
August.
Mid to end of November, I think. No, I mean you'll have stuff.
Maybe.
They don't eat them pods until, so as long as they can like grow enough to produce pods. Those pods will stay there through
November,
early
and then they're
November
gone.
at least. Yeah.
So that, I think that's number one. And then number two is that if you do make that move and you do make that plant opportunity, I don't think that amount of food, let's say 2 acres of beans, in Kentucky, is going to affect the antler size of those deer. It
definitely won't.
So, again, I think there's a high enough natural. Now, if we're in an epic drought or something, I get that. But like, if you're in decent quality areas, of which most of the whitetail range is, if you're down on the coast of the Gulf Coast, different ball game, or Virginia, whatever. But I think that ultimately, you're not going to influence the protein levels and the antler size of those deer by planting a 2-acre bean field.
I don't think it matters. I'm with Sturgis on that.
Yeah,
I think that those deer will find food. They'll be fed regardless of if you have summer food.
And here's the reason that I always I'm planning. I'm like, man, I'd like to plant beans, and I probably will just in one of these places just to see what happens. But it's because my deer hunting drive is I want to see those deer in the summertime. I want to see those deer in the bean field. I want to see those deer on camera in August. I want to see those deer on camera in September. But frankly, it doesn't matter.
And frankly, it may be a bad sign if you are seeing
I think for most of us, and I'm throwing myself in this, is like, I want to plant that because I want to see those deer in the 2, 3, 4 weeks leading up to the season. It's hard for me to sit back and feel like I'm in a good place come September 30th and I haven't seen a shooter buck.
That's where I'm saying I think you need to assess and determine what kind of a property it is before you try to make it something.
And what's that come with? Just time?
Yeah.
Time on a property?
I mean, time is the absolute, but I think we're getting a handle on it. You can look at a property and say, okay, I think a buck will be here this time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's dependent on summer bedding scenarios versus winter bedding scenarios, and then thicket / secluded cover for rutting.
So if you see, let's say you see good sign in, I don't know, late October, early
sign
November,
will tell you too, sure.
On a property.
Yep.
What would you plant? Brassicas?
I don't know. I don't know if it matters as much. I mean, probably just an attractive food source, even like a rye. Because I think that time of year, all that matters is the does are going to be in it.
So I think where I'm getting at, I agree, first off, surprisingly. I think where I'm getting at is there is and this maybe isn't for like the public guys as much as it is some of the guys who are trying to manage property and stuff, but there's a nagging mindset that I need to benefit the deer. I need to provide for the deer. I want to provide for the deer. And so that nagging is like, well, I want to provide protein at this period to help grow antlers, or I want to provide protein at this period to help recover from the rut. I think that's important. But there's an ultimate piece of that where your property may not be conducive to help the deer. So you planting brassicas it's not going to hurt anything. Sure shit probably isn't going to help your hunting.
You almost have to look at it, I think, at like relying on the surrounding properties to like enable you to make decisions that are going to make it the best hunting property possible. Mm-hmm. An example of that would be, if I look at, let's look at my property. If I look at the surrounding and say, okay, or even on my property, these deer are not going to have an issue surviving or thriving with food, whether I plant or not. Mm-hmm. I think that's the case.
Because there's other food around.
Yep. That said, why would I plant anything that they could eat that time of year? I don't care if they're there. I would rather, spend as much time and effort putting, stuff on that's going to draw them in during a time that I can hunt them.
That's the toughest mindset I think people have, is that they're thinking of almost like a gold rush. Like, I got to plant, I got to get the deer here. But if they're there in the summertime, that doesn't mean that they're going to be there during the hunting season. And for whatever in our minds, I think it sits there.
It's probably cover more than food in most situations. Mm-hmm. I think that a lot of people have a misperception of like, well, if I don't plant food, what are they going to eat? Okay. Like, we haven't started planting food plots until 10 years ago, and deer have always been there thriving.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, and go into any of your food plots in whatever mid-October when the acorns are raining down like crazy. There's no deer in your food plot. They're all in the woods eating acorns. I think it's an interesting. Obviously, at the end of the day, I'm going to plant a shitload of food plots in 22, right? But it's understanding what is the right food plot. And I get Jeff's thing around like the winter rye. I tried that this year.
Okay, so speaking of rye, I have a question for you. So like on that property where I killed my buck, when I said if I had a thicket type property that you're going to rut hunt, I would plant rye or something. But we didn't. We planted brassicas. Do you think I should change? Do you think we should change that? I
would. And the reason I would is no offense, you got lucky catching that buck in that plot. He wasn't there to eat, nor were...
He's looking for does.
Yeah, nor did it seem like there was a lot of does utilizing that plot even. Until you put the corn bow out.
Okay, fair.
So that's my downfall of brassicas. Like I'm not against brassicas.
Yeah.
I think if your property sets up for late season, brassicas is a good opportunity. But if you're thinking about October, November especially, I don't think brassicas bring much to the table.
You planted that rye this year that we bought? Did it seem? What was your like observation on them? Did they hit it?
Hammered it starting in like early October. Haven't let up on it. The nice thing is we had a pretty mild November, December, and so it's still growing.
And they've been eating it?
Yeah, so I've got an exclosure cage inside my food plot.
Okay.
That rye is this tall inside that cage.
So they're definitely hammered.
And outside the cage, it's this tall.
See, that's interesting because I planted some that like I just can't tell.
Yeah,
I didn't do an exclosure cage, but it doesn't seem like they're nipped off constantly unless it grows that fast, and I just can't tell.
Yeah, I mean, it's hammered. Yeah, well, I mean, you get a week of or a few days of 40, 50 degree temperatures, and that shit's growing, especially with the amount of rain we had too. So now that said, I don't know if I'm in favor of winter rye because what I didn't see is when I planted brassicas, and this is small sample size, right? I'm just talking about my place in Pennsylvania. When I did brassicas, I would at least from end of November to through gun season, have deer pretty consistently moving through that food plot in daylight hours. You know, nipping at bulbs or whatever. I didn't see that this year. Like when they would come into the into the winter rye plot, they hit the rye and they were gone like pretty quickly. Whereas in a brassica field, they definitely seem like they spent more time, maybe because they had to work to get the bulb out. I don't know. You know, and I know that has nothing to do with, I think, the nutrition of it, probably nothing to do with the attraction of it, but I'm simply saying from a property aspect, like even some of the bucks, I had plenty of bucks last year on that property behind the house coming in and around the property, around the food plot. This year with winter rye, even though it grew, and like, dude, you go up to it now, it's the only green thing out there. And in the middle of the woods, there's this bright green field of winter rye. They're not hitting it as hard as I would think. And I'm not sure why. Maybe because it's milder and they're using browse, or there's still acorns on the ground. Like they're not digging in the snow. I don't know.
Yeah, I find myself like kind of humbled by this conversation. I'm not as confident about some of the blends I've been planning, or I don't necessarily know exactly why I've been planning them where. I think in this...
Well, that's where I'm at. Like we're planning in our minds. I understand why I'm planting brassicas, or I understand why I'm planting beans or winter rye, but I don't know if I'm understanding and applying it to the property.
Okay. We're honing in on something here.
Come on.
It almost seems like... I don't know what the conversation is necessarily, but like, do you know how different illnesses or medications and stuff like seem to, I don't know if it's necessarily true, but coordinate with like certain blood types? Like that seems like a pretty relevant comparison to say like, okay, this property is like this blood type or whatever. Like we'd say this is what type of property this is. Ergo, I would diagnose it and you know, as this type of a hunting property, and therefore we should plant X.
That's it. We're not doing
that. Maybe it's more diverse than that, and it's like, okay, this property is good for X and Y, so let's plant X and Y.
Yep, and I think where the problem is, and not everybody's doing this, and I'll say that I was guilty of it when I did a lot of consulting, and probably still am, is I would diagnose the plantings to what I thought was needed on the property versus diagnosing the plantings per what the property was offering.
That seems like the right thought process for sure.
And I think a lot of us are trying to, just like we're trying to force a 5-year-old buck to grow in a place that frankly ain't going to grow a 5-year-old buck. We're trying to force plantings to provide for a herd that frankly might not be there.
Seems like the only exception to that argument is that late season piece, where at some point
if you have a lot
food
of big
is
food,
more important than
summer
cover.
too, though. If you've got a big bean field and there's no other bean fields around in the summer, there will be big bucks in that bean field in the summertime. They will.
Yeah, I don't.
If there's no other bean fields around.
I don't know. Maybe. I'm not as familiar with that scenario, but I know that there's more food elsewhere during that time of year than there is in the late. Like in the late season, they have to.
Food is limited.
Food is limited. In the summer, yes, if they're like within a reasonable proximity, they'll probably migrate there. But if
it's not as limited as if in the winter.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yep. I get that. That's where the fall is so interesting, because as the season starts, like in Kentucky, it starts in September. There's still food everywhere. As you get into October, doesn't matter where you're at in most of the whitetail range, all of a sudden you've got these lush food plots, but you got acorns falling all over the place into November. And then there's this period of like December to January where it's like, oh, there's no food anywhere except here, and the deer are here. Makes you think that the easiest time to kill a buck is now, if you have a big food source.
Oh, it definitely is. 100%. Maybe not the easiest, but the most predictable.
Close.
Well, the counter to that, or like the
there's less of them at this point because they're all dead.
Yeah. Well, the catch to that is it's harder too, because first of all, it's colder weather.
Yeah.
Entry and access is going to be way more difficult just because there's less foliage on the trees and stuff like that. So, but if you have that scenario, if you have a giant thermal cover, type of a property or a setting, and you can have a good food source that exists during these really cold times, they're going to be there.
Yeah.
They're going to be there.
You're at least going to locate them. Killing them is a whole different ballgame. But it is, to really dissect that, let's just say October 1 to December 31 timeframe, right? Those 3 months. I would say that most of us, if you look at what you've planted food plot-wise in the past, probably are missing the mark. You're probably planting something that you think is going to be like, oh, this will bring bucks in November, or this will bring bucks in October. That was my mindset this year. My mindset was, I'm going to bail on brassicas because I didn't see them eat it in October, and I'm going to plant winter rye, and that's going to give me a better opportunity throughout the season to kill a mature buck. I think it was worse. And that's not saying that it would be worse for everybody, but for the way that I planted on the properties, it didn't provide enough tonnage because it's all woods and there's limited food sources. Didn't provide enough tonnage, and it also just did not seem to be as attractive throughout the season as I thought it would be. And they just didn't spend the time in it. Like, they'd be there and they'd be gone. They'd be there, they'd be gone.
And so your comment about, if we were to do all beans at your Ohio place, even though that food source is great, because all of the surrounding cover is
moderately thick but not thermal.
I don't know if they will be there. Certainly does and stuff would be there, but I would think a buck is going to just want to be in a place that's like secluded, good summer bedding, and the food will be there because it's the summer. Yeah,
and I mean to the point of then moving into October and November, I think you have a better chance of killing that deer on an oak flat than you do on a food source, like a planted food source.
Agreed.
But do you need that planted food source to keep the does engaged, which come late October, November keeps the buck engaged? That's where we're back in this like toilet bowl of deer management of, you're spinning around. You're the floater who won't go down at this point.
I don't know. I don't know if there is a right answer to all of it.
I think it's a lot of trial and error. I think given my Ohio place this year, I don't know. Like, first of all, I do know that they've nobody's planted anything in these fields besides, hay field it, whatever. And it's cool season, fescues, old pasture, whatever. So this will be the first year that somebody has actively gone in and said, I'm going to make these into food plots, right? Into a food source. You can't go wrong in year one, right? You're just putting food in and see what happens. The only information that I know, from past history is These guys have killed a lot of deer in October and November in bow season prior to gun season. They've seen bucks. They've got camera pictures of bucks. They've sent me bucks. When I was there in the first week in November, there was a lot of active buck sign. So the deer are there, and I don't know what kind of I know somewhat of the quality of deer in that area, but the deer are there in October, November. Now, that might be because there's so many giant white and red oaks producing acorns. So what do I plant? What is the targeted food source? Could I plant beans and be like, well, maybe I'll get some of these unicorn overlap deer that eat the beans and they stay longer, and then they're there during the season, and then I kill them and I'm more influential. There's not enough data to support that right now. So I think I have to go with just a straight fall planting of something.
You're in Ohio? We're talking?
Mm-hmm. Like, is it just straight brassicas? Is it straight oats and wheat and rye? The one thing we haven't talked about that I do think is a kind of a safe fall, and especially when you're planting new plots or new areas, is clover. Clover is a major safe fall in that I can get that in the ground in March, April. Throughout the summer, it's there providing some tonnage and good protein if the deer want it. And then throughout the fall, it's also a really attractive source until December. Then it gets cut down usually. I mean, it's flat by December, January. Come March, April, and green up, it's the first to come up and provide, nutrition to those deer. So this is the, we talk a lot about the annual side, but there's a perennial aspect there. And clover's the easiest to maintain, and that's why I bring that up over an alfalfa. Chicory would fall in the same category, and I wouldn't go and plant all of the plots in that by any means, but maybe the bookend half-acre plot at the end, and maybe one of the plots closer to the house up front, I put in a perennial clover, and then the middle ones are left to, hey, let's try beans and brassicas, and or plant beans and just freaking disc them under and plant brassicas. I don't know.
I almost wonder if, just as a curveball, what if you would do, sections of switch, throughout. So in the very front, and then you want that barrier. But what if you did one every 50 yards? Just a switch, cut, or a patch? A barrier. Okay, so what if you, in the very front, you just did a section of switch to protect it from the road, and then you've got, how wide?
It's pretty wide. I mean, 400 yards.
What? No, it's 400 yards long.
No, the one up front is more wide than deep because there's a creek that runs behind it and then a section of woods. Okay.
I guess regardless, whichever way longer it is. So what if
so you broke it up.
Let's say it's looks like this. Let's say the very front of it is switch. Or are you saying in this case the switch would go like this?
Switch, the road's here, so switch would go here.
Okay. So what if in addition to this switch,
creek is here?
What if in addition to this switch, you said it's 400 yards long? What if every 75 or 100 yards you did a 30 to 50 yard stretch of switch, and you had, because you're going to have to get a tractor from one to the next, you alternate the tractor road through them. I think it's going to make that plot hunt a lot bigger.
Yeah, for sure.
If nothing else.
Sounds like a maze.
Yeah, exactly.
Same plantings in each of those in between?
I think so. And they'll probably, deer will bed in that switch too. I mean, if you got enough of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're getting dinner with Sturgis next week. We should, let's pick his brain.
We'll be sitting there on the napkin.
We'll keep feeding him beers and we'll say, yeah.
It's an interesting thing because so I think, again, if you're going into a new property, or even if you're giving this, a thought for the first time, the first year, you can't go wrong. Just plant something. That's why I say clover, because clover is about the most safe thing that I can think of in a planting, especially if you get it in March. Be able to maintain that through. By the time you hit hunting season, you got a lush stand, and it's high quality protein. It's attractive. It's digestible. It's kind of fail-safe. But if you kind of think about your property, just go at it and make sure you're observing kind of what I said, hey, brassicas, I didn't see as many deer in October. So I'm going to go to a grain that I think is going to attract them in October. Okay, I did that, but boy, it really didn't have the effect that I thought. What's next? Do I go back to Brassicas? Do I try something different? And keep in mind, we're talking about plantings here. There's other things happening on your property. Acorns are dropping. Bedding is here. Corridor is here. So, like, just because you don't see the activity in your food plot doesn't mean that your property isn't able to kill big bucks. It's just maybe that food source isn't what they're looking for. They're looking for secluded bedding to acorn flat and back. And at this time of year, you could be like my property behind the house. Like, I did see an 8-point last night on camera, but hell, like I don't see a buck from mid-December till next September.
Yeah, it's complicated. I think you just have to, try to read the property, figure out what blood type it is, and play to your strengths as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But also understand that it's situational and it's dynamic, and so from year to year, as the cover situation may change, or the pressure situation may change. Like, you just have to, I think, try to do your best to play to your strengths and then improve your weaknesses. And as those, come up to the same level, ultimately, I think your property, you want to have hunting situations throughout the entire season.
I think that's the biggest key.
Ultimately,
you may be able to slowly manipulate the course of your property, especially if it's a new one, like this Ohio place. They hunted it, but they haven't managed it. I'm going to go in and actively manage it. Could change the entire dynamic of the property the moment I put 8 acres of food in there. But if you're actively on this property, whether it's owned, leased, permission, whatever, keep in mind, there's a good chance that you're not going to be able to manipulate this property to be something that it's not, right? If you've got open timber, you're not going to have late season hunting opportunities probably.
Well, see, that's an extreme transition. like on my property, if I were to go in and do this 200 acres of early successional or switch, that's a major renovation.
Yeah, it changes the entire property.
That changes the dynamic, and that's a tough and potentially expensive thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Just like if my property, or even in Kentucky, there is no food, there is no crops, there's nothing. You go in and plant 5-6 acres of some highly attractive food source, could change the entire dynamic of the property. Maybe not even for the good. That's what people don't think of, is because if you're trying to kill mature buck, just by planting a bunch of food and drawing in a bunch of deer doesn't mean you're going to increase your chance of killing a mature buck.
That's a good point.
And so I think that as you start to lay this stuff out in your mind and you look at your property, identify the blood type. What is it? Like, is it, you may be hunting your balls off in October and November, and frankly, you should be hunting January 1 because that's the only time you're going to kill a damn deer.
And not before that, because you're pushing them off.
Exactly. And so a property that to you may be desolate and think this is the worst hunting property ever, if you could keep off of it. I know that's a big if and it's a big ask, but if you could keep off of it until January 1, then move in, you may kill a booner every year.
Yeah. Well, and the cameras will tell you, not as good as, just years on the property. The more time you spend there, just observing deer, you'll start to figure out how they move on it and how they use it and stuff. But I'm not sure exactly where I was going with it. But yeah, like the cameras will tell you, just read it. And if they're not, if they're not there, or they're not there in daylight, then
that's a whole different ballgame.
Then use that to confirm your suspicion. Oh, it's huge. Well, dude, people don't realize
the daylight nighttime movement is man, it's a frustrating one. That's one thing that I hear people say all the time, like, well, just because you got him on camera at night doesn't mean he's not moving during the day. Sure shit doesn't say he's moving during the day. Well,
they are. These bucks move during the day. There's no question. They do. If they're not showing up on your property in daylight, then they're not bedding there.
Correct.
And it's not like, oh, I got one picture of him and he doesn't show up till night. It still comes down to, are you perceiving it correctly or not? And a lot of people do that wrong. So that's the first issue. But these deer are moving in daylight in most cases. Somewhere. And it may be in a very, tight core area. But when you find that, like, it can be obvious. Like, oh, like here's the bedroom. Here's all the sign. He's obviously moving here in daylight. And you have to be really, careful with those types of areas. But
yeah, I mean, I've got plenty of people that I know that have a great property, have a lot of daytime movement, don't kill shit because they don't hunt it right. And frankly, I would probably want a property where most of my pictures are nighttime than daytime, because if I get a ton of daytime activity, it's tough to get in there and hunt a place because, it could be all bedding. Dude, I'm telling you it is. By the time you look at a property, if you're getting a mature buck just daylighting like crazy on that property,
I'll buy it from you.
it's an extremely tough situation to not overpressure that deer.
Oh, I don't think so. I mean, yes. But are you going to take a bad farm that you can get into easily over a good farm?
No. I'm just saying that people have properties where all they get is nighttime pictures. Is it tough to kill a buck? Yes, because he's not bedding there. He's not moving there according to your cameras during daylight. Yep. He will at some point. Yep. It's inevitable. I mean, the majority of us listening to this podcast hunt a deer based on nighttime pictures.
Sure.
The people that are fortunate enough to have a property that they're like, yeah, I just get a bunch of daylight pictures of bucks. That's awesome. I think that they probably hunt that way too much. They get overconfident.
Sure.
And they put pressure on it, and then those daylight pictures stop.
Yes, but that's not enough to say you don't want that property or that you would choose a nighttime property over it.
No, those guys are lucky.
You want a buck bedding property, obviously.
Frankly, the pictures, if you're getting...
You just have to create ways for you to hunt it, effectively.
Well, and I think that to the point, we talked about this a couple times. A couple of people even commented and wrote us on it. We talked about like how the first year you buy a property, it's like, man, this is great. Then it slowly starts to decrease. And you're like, what the hell? Well, it's because maybe the old owner wasn't on it all the time. You're on it all the time. It starts to decrease because you're putting pressure on it. Those bucks don't want to be there. Same thing with this is if you've got a property, let's say you buy a property. I buy this Ohio piece. First year, I get some plots in and it's just daylight movement all over the place, big bucks. Don't do anything. Hunt it as least as you can, figure out strategic in and outs, but do not screw with that property. Don't get bold and aggressive. Don't decide to make a timber cut here. Don't do that.
It's access and frequency. Like in that situation, you want to look for a scenario where like, okay, if they're all over these food plots in daylight, can I jump right off the road into a box blind and kill them here? And I know that may not be the preferred method to hunt, and so there's a whole side of this conversation that's like, well, I want to kill a deer on my terms. Okay. It gets harder.
You don't kill a deer on your terms. Well, you kill a deer on his terms.
Yeah, I mean, to be as effective as possible, you really have to do it on his terms, and that's through observation.
Well, and I think why I say all that is because I think, and I love it, you and I live for this off season, there is an element of over-management that is occurring in the deer hunting community right now. Mm-hmm. The fact that I'm going to go in and I'm going to cut this, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to plant this, and I'm going to go in and strategically put a windrow here, and I'm going to plant switch here, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to hang this stand, and then this stand, and then this box blind. There's an element of over-management that pressure destroys that property.
Yep.
And it is one of the hardest things for us to do who are passionate about deer management and land management, because the thing we want to do is be out on the property. And in our minds, improving the habitat, improving the food source, improving the bedding. But there is a very, very fine line, and it's a lot closer to you than you think, of over managing that property to where you've just made it worse. You've put that pressure on that you can't fix. And there's a time frame to do it, right? That we know that we can get out there and we can do whatever we want, and the buck doesn't care. But there's a time frame, and a lot of that is in that July, August planting time frame and tree stand handing.
Well, it's not that he doesn't care, it's that he's not there.
Yeah. Sometimes he's there.
Yeah, ideally he's not. Like on
Absolutely.
these, these good properties and stuff, like he's probably not there. So you can go in and, April, May, June,
100%.
Do whatever you want.
Well, yeah, I mean, hell, on the majority of my properties, I won't in Kentucky because I'm starting to see deer, but majority of my properties, I can walk out right now and start doing TSI. There ain't a damn deer on the property.
Yeah.
They're just not there.
Yeah. Well, dude,
he's not there for sure.
I don't think the does and small bucks are affected by human pressure at all.
No.
Like maybe at all is to take it too far.
A little bit, but not to the extent
they will tolerate it.
Yeah, they'll absolutely. I mean, they're the ones where, your landowner says, well, yeah, I drive my buggy all over the place, and those bucks just watch me. They're 1 and 2 year olds.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those big bucks don't tolerate that.
Yeah.
And I think that's where, when you start to talk about, and this is where I get wrapped up, when I think about the management aspect and I get all these items on my list, this is my time frame to do it. The moment I get outside of that time frame, you can't do it. If you do, you're going to screw it up. You're going to put extra pressure on the property, and you're going to the improvements that you make will be way outweighed by the pressure that you've put on it. And I see that a lot with people. You know, in their minds, they're cutting lanes, and they're doing this, and they're burning this, and they're planting this, and they're cutting this, and timber, you know.
Stay out of it.
Yeah, they just, and it's hard, man, because we love it. I get that. But go find a place where you want to go and cut and make, you know, hinge cuts and TSI all you want. But your property, especially when you go out there and you lay out a camera, and the first thing you're seeing is daily deer movement. I don't care if it's just does and fawns, but just daily deer movement, and then buck movement, and then things like, just stay out of it until it's the time to go in and kill. And I know that's the hardest thing to do. And you may be thinking in your head, like, well, yeah, but like, what if I planted this? Or what if why? He's already moving during daylight. He already exists. You don't need to force your property to create something. It already did it, dude.
I think it's just really tough to, like, you can definitely do things to improve the situation, like large scale things. If you can
Where's the balance, though?
Yep. Well, if you can introduce food, or you can, you know, with one swath do a big timber project and stuff, that's great. And then get out of there. But it's hard because what a buck wants is absence of humans, and
he wants peace.
And so how do you like get that out of, you know, constant management? Like they're opposite of each other. You know, it's just like petting the thing until it dies.
I know. And we as deer managers and land managers feel like we're doing good. But
you just go in and Tommy Boy a property.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Stroke it. Yeah, it doesn't, and I find myself guilty of it too, but that's where I think when you come up with a plan and you say, okay, this is why the choose what you're going to plant so wisely. When do I want to go into that property? When do I want to plant? When do I want to get out of that property? When do I want to go through, and where am I going to timber, and what am I going to do, and I'm going to get out? You know, and that's why manageable chunks are really nice to say, okay, cool, I'm going to go in, I'm going to hit this 5 acres in this next 2-3 days, and then I'm done. I'm not going to go in there, or I'm going to go over here and do 2 acres over here. And at some point, the end is the end. It's not like, man, I got tied up, I have to go back and do. You don't have time. Mm-hmm. Time's over. You go in there now and start cutting, and you're going to screw something up.
I'd be curious. You know, we're going to have Jeff back. Well, we're going to talk to Jeff at ATA, and I don't know if it'll come up or not, but like, I'm curious, you know, because we talk so much about staying out, but Jeff, you know, puts out so much content about constant management and stuff. Like, I'm curious, you know, what he would have to say about like where's the line. You know,
I think the one thing that I see in a lot of Jeff's properties, and you know, unfortunately mine don't set up for it, is your ability to access cleanly in and out.
Yeah, like
even this Ohio piece. You know,
huge.
I'm going right up through the gut. I can walk the border because it's public on my outside, but I can't really it's difficult to access.
I think that's going to limit your stand locations.
100%. Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to say, hey, I'm going to go sit in the, you know, far northwest corner. Like I got to walk right through the gut of the property. If I walk the border, if I walk the far, north border on a southwest wind or something like that, then yeah, everything's blowing down into public, and I'm, you know, my food source is upwind, which is hopefully where those deer are, especially in the morning, you know, and I can get back to those spots. But and if I do it, it's for a reason. I'm not just going back there because like maybe it's the right spot. Well, like that deer's there, and that's what these are so super. Like we talk about over hunting these things, but when you can get back in an area and you can set this thing up with a solar panel and you don't have to touch it, and you can get information, you will know when the right time to get back there is. Because you go back too early, you screw it up.
Well, it's all relative to like where they are, and so it's not just like stay out of all woods at all times.
No,
it's, you know, do everything you can to know where these mature bucks are bedding, and
it's going to change. And it's going to change from July to August to September to November to January. Like those deer aren't going to be in that same buck bed every day throughout the whole year.
Well, and like I would imagine on a property like yours in Ohio. Again, I haven't seen it, but there's probably.
It's awesome.
I hope, yeah, I'm sure it is. I can't wait to see it. I mean, how many stand locations do you think are there? Like,
I mean, the cool thing is I've got 2 hawk box blinds that will be like easy access. One will be across the road. One will be on that side.
Across the road? Mm-hmm. There's a road that.
There's a road through the middle. That's where that one food plot is. Right on the other side of. cabins here, road,
Okay.
food plot, and then a corner of my property's over there.
Okay.
And then there's big woods behind that food plot, which I'm not expecting the deer to come from this way. I'm expecting them to come from the other way.
Okay.
So I'm going to put one there. And then I've got one in the head of that ditch. I will have a few aggressive ones. Like, let's say there's a deer in the northwest corner that's coming off that knob. I'll walk right up that creek and right up into that stand. But it's not going to be, I know that I'm going to blow everything else out.
Man, it is so hard to access some of this stuff. Seems like the huntable spots just get less and less. The more you start to understand, that a buck is not, on certain properties, certain times of the year, and that access is so important.
Well, dude, there's another. I mean, I could go literally. It's probably 2 miles, go to the other side of the road, come up through the swamp in public to the northeast corner of my property, and come in that way if they're coming from my destination food plot back to that to bed.
Yeah.
Maybe you have to. But you just don't want to, like, nobody wants to be doing that all the time. Like, you make sure when you go into there, it's what you think's the prime time to do it. These ridges are awesome, though. I do have some really nice access up on these. I mean, they're flat, and it's 20 to 60 yards wide, and it's just oak ridge. And that's my border the whole way around. But yeah, I don't know. And that's the thing. Without being on it and without having a camera on it, I don't know. I don't know where the deer are bedding. I can make assumptions, I don't know where they're moving to feed. That will change the moment I put food in.
Oh, well, we're going to find out. When we go out in February, we should be able to figure it out pretty quick.
And then it'll change. The moment you drop, I don't care if it's 8 acres of beans, 8 acres of brassicas, a combination of stuff, it will change the deer movement completely on your property. That's the other thing to keep in mind. Like, if you've got patterns on deer and you say, well, good example here is even at my house, like, I've got a 1/4 acre plot that's about to go to 1.5 acres. The moment I do that, the way the deer move on my property changes completely. And you just have to anticipate. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's just anticipate that, like, deer are going to do things different because you changed it. I'm not changing any openings on the Ohio place, but I'm going to add 8 to 10 acres of food. It will change how those deer use that property completely. And so it may take 2 years just to understand what the hell they're doing. That's the fun of it, but you just got to be smart about that. Over management side is something I'm guilty of.
Me too.
And it's just something that you really have to take into consideration of, like, okay, if I go in here and I do this cut, what am I affecting? What am I doing it? How much? And then when time's up, you're out. And don't freak out if you bump deer or you do something. Just, know you got a certain amount of time to do it. And there's a lot of time when you don't do it. I know plenty of guys who in July, August, and they are holding deer at that time, bucks at that time, are going through and doing hinge cuts and stuff. That's not a good time to do that. And maybe those deer aren't super sensitive to it, but you've disturbed an area that for some reason they like to bed. And does that, maybe it does benefit you enough that come November, December, there's another buck or bigger bucks in there bedding in there. Great. Then you won. You did a good thing, but it's probably not worth the risk. I don't know.
I don't know either. It's hard to make these things do what you want, It just seems like sometimes you just have to make do with what you got and observe as closely as possible. And if something seems like it's working, try to replicate it.
Yeah. Guess a couple house cleaning items before we get out.
Yeah.
So
He already wrote you back. I saw that.
Oh, Norm did?
Yep.
Norm Yoder.
I thought so. Somebody
Congratulations. South Cam Fusion X coming your way. This week we've got some apparel, which is on our people probably are like, where's your website? We are
Austin
Hunter.
Yager. That's who wrote you back.
Huh?
Austin Yager.
Oh.
That's who wrote you back.
His YouTube name is Norm Yoder.
Gotcha.
So Austin. Congratulations.
As long as it's the same person. I don't know. That's who just
He's like, I'm claiming it. We've got hats. So we've got a green and black, loading in black hunter hat. We've got a tan and brown H icon hunter hat, and maybe some shirts depending on what size you wear. So we're gonna do these for the giveaway. Maybe we'll do, I don't know, 2 or 3 names. We'll see. And then, if you go to our site, we've got some shirts on there, some We Are Hunter shirts. We've got hats. We've got new hats coming in, Icon Green and the black on black as well. We ran out.
These are the ones, the one you and I are wearing are, I know.
Sold out.
Those are the ones people want, and they're sold out. So just give us some time here as we're...
I got another load of those coming by end of January.
Cool.
But right now
we'll keep getting more stuff.
We do have loading with the Hunter. We do have brown with the H icon, and we do have some shirts on there. But we're gonna do some of these for the giveaway this week.
We have decals too. I think I don't
do
know
have
if we'll sell them. I think we're just gonna put them in.
Yeah, you buy a hat, we'll throw a decal in there, card decal in there. So we got some of those in there. Buy shirt, give you a decal. So Jared and Colton and I are leaving tomorrow.
Yep.
Go to Louisville, Kentucky for the ATA.
This is all getting torn down right after this.
Yep, and we will we'll pull in a bunch of guys. So I don't know how we're going to structure that yet, because I mean some of those are going to be probably 30-minute conversations. Some will be maybe longer. But I guess how to anticipate the podcast following this podcast, what they're going to look like.
Don't know.
Some sort of form. I don't know if we're going to release like 30-minute minis, if we're going to combine people to them.
Depends how fast Colton can edit.
Yeah, I just don't know what those end up being. You know, like if Waddell's on for 30 minutes, is it a Michael Waddell podcast? Is it?
Yeah.
We'll
play it by ear?
Yeah. So we might have some like shorter type in-person podcasts here to follow, I guess, in terms of expectations. And then we've got a schedule building here. I don't know if Enfault's going to be there. He's recovering from COVID still, but if he is, we'll probably have him on. If he's not, we'll end up getting him on. But we've got a list of people coming on. Sean Luchtel and his dad Rex are coming on from Heartland Bow Hunter.
Jason Balloon is going to come on same day.
Jason, who was...
I've talked to him since he killed a really nice whitetail in North Dakota.
As we were struggle busting it.
Yep. He's killed several other bucks since then, too. So
Did he? And like Wisconsin and stuff?
Yeah.
That's cool. So, yeah, we got Jason on.
Well, at ATA, I think we're going to have Jeff Sturgis.
Yep.
Mike Reed and Jared Mills from Midwest Whitetail.
Possibly.
Yep. Aaron from the Hunting Public.
Yep.
And maybe some
Craig or anybody else out there.
Yep. Jeremy Moore from Dog Bone Hunter might swing by.
Ooh, that's a good one as we get into shed season.
Like you said, maybe Michael Waddell.
Yeah, Waddell will probably snag.
Jeff
Andrea
is coming.
Outdoor Alley will be on.
Outdoor Alley. If Jeff is going to be there, maybe we'll grab Chris B as well.
Yeah. We're going to go out to dinner with Chris B on Friday. So let's grab Chris.
There you go.
Crispy.
Crispy chicken.
Real funny, Jared. We've got a pretty good list. So I don't know what those will look at. Like you'll see that here next week of what these start to take formation, and we'll kind of bring you what's going on at the ATA show and the industry. And
I know you and I are itching to get on this I Bought a Farm podcast.
Oh, yeah.
So
I bought a farm.
Yeah, I mean, I guess without further ado, like we'll start scheduling some guests to kind of go down that rabbit hole. And I guess we're going to figure it out as we go. I mean, we have kind of a loose format for that, but I think we're just really going to dig into these conversations around, property management, but really the whole process of like seeking out and purchasing a property.
Yep, buying a property, the steps, the right people to talk to, creative ways to purchase property.
Financing, surveying.
When you bought it, like, timber assessments, when to harvest timber, what to harvest, other ways to make property rentals, etc.
How to be profitable with that property if ultimately you want to sell it.
Eventually profitability. So, yeah, I mean, all aspects of that and really getting creative with, trying to encourage people to figure if you want property, there's ways to do it. Just got to get creative.
Yeah, and so because we're going through it for the first time, you just bought your first.
Freaking going through it right now. I was talking to how to get insurance on a deer camp that's only got a wood burner for heat.
Yeah,
no go.
And I think so many times those are the questions left unanswered. They're they're happening on private phone calls and stuff. Yep. And so we want to get some of those guys on the podcast and really talk through the nuts and bolts of how do I finance this property? How do I go through the steps of
how much do I need to bring to the table? What are the interest rates? There's lots of different ways. Do I need 20% cash? Can I leverage other things? Can I do line of credit? Should I file an LLC? Should I put it under my own name? Like, list goes on, dude, for sure. Should I do it with a business partner? Like, a lot of things that go into this that, I mean, we're learning. I've done it once on a whim. I've just done it again. So, and then I'm still learning. I still don't, you got to surround yourself with the right people, and I think that's what this podcast is going to be. So similar setup. They may be shorter, but we're going to bring in guests that are knowledgeable on these subjects to educate us, educate you guys, be a resource of information. There'll be a
crossover too. I mean,
oh, for sure. It'll just be really important to figure out how, you got to find the right sources. Like I was talking even to a financial advisor this morning, and he's like, listen, if you're going to do 1031 exchanges at some point, which we'll get into what that is in this podcast, you better find a CPA that knows how to do 1031 exchanges. And that may not be the CPA that you're used to using.
Yeah.
And so don't set yourself up for failure just because you're like, well, I have a CPA.
And same goes for appraisers, lenders, insurance companies. This raw land and recreational land thing is not for everybody. There's a lot of these companies that are like, well, if it doesn't have a house on it, we don't touch it. So you have to know, which companies to seek out and who to work with. And I think
it's getting better. I mean, there's more and more opportunities out there, more options out there. You just got to be smart about it, but understand your investment in it. Is it just a hunting property? That's great. Can your current salary and lifestyle sustain buying a property just to hunt for a while? Or do you need to make money on it? Or are you eventually going to sell it because you invested your retirement into it and you want to make money to reinvest back into your retirement?
Yeah.
So lots of things to talk about there. And we'll probably get that rolling, I would assume sometime right after ATA show.
Yep. And last thing, speaking of ATAs, our booth is 3607. 3607. So
it says Stone Road Media on it.
We're gonna have the whole podcast set up. All of those guests that we mentioned will be kind of in and out. And we will have like speakers, and we're gonna bring the TV with us and stuff. So you guys are welcome to come and watch, like hang out with us. We'll be around the booth and stuff. So we would love to see you.
Like to be a COVID-free zone.
That's right. So. All right. Well, good deal, man.
All right. Well, we appreciate everybody listening to episode 54 of the HUNTR Podcast. And if you're going to ATA show,
see you there.
See you there.
Later.
Take me